Welcome to Inside Scoop Live, the podcast where indie authors get personal, sharing insights about their books, their writing journeys, and their passions. I'm your host, Sherry Hoyt, and I invite you to join me for engaging conversations with both debut indie authors and seasoned veterans. Whether you're looking for your next great read or a bit of inspiration, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. R.G. Belsky and Bonnie Traymore joined the show today to talk about their new psychological thriller, Swipe, where a suspicious death tied to a dating app sparks a tense investigation, and one woman's pursuit of justice blurs the line between victim and predator. Before we get started, here's the inside scoop on the authors. R.G. Belsky is an award-winning author of crime fiction and a journalist in New York City. Belsky has published more than 20 novels, most of them set in the New York City media world, where he has had a long career as a top editor at the New York Post, New York Daily News, Star Magazine, and NBC News. He also writes thrillers under the name Dana Perry, and he is a contributing writer for the Big Thrill magazine as well as Book Trib. You can learn more about R.G. Belsky at rgbelsky.com. Bonnie Traymore is the Amazon Charts best-selling author of 8 domestic psychological thrillers. Her thrillers feature strong but relatable female protagonists who peel back the layers of suburban American life and give readers a peek inside. The plots explore difficult topics such as jealousy, infidelity, murder, and the impact of psychological disorders, but she also includes bits of romance and humor to lighten the mood from time to time. Bonnie loves Hitchcock movies, psychological thriller novels, coffee, and dark chocolate. Not necessarily in that order, and sometimes simultaneously. She has a doctorate in United States history and resides in Honolulu with her family. She's an active member of International Thriller Writers and Mystery Writers of America. And you can learn more about Bonnie Traymore at bonnietraymore.com. Well, hi, Archie and Bonnie. Welcome to Inside Scoop Live.
Hey, Sherry.
Hi, Sherry.
I'm so glad you're both here. I read Swipe, I loved it, and I can't wait for you to share more about the story with our listeners. I guess to get us started, why don't you tell us what Swipe is about and what inspired the story?
Sure, I can take this one. The idea came when I met a friend of mine for coffee, and she was telling me about this horrible internet date that she had on a dating app. And, we kind of laughed it off. And she said, you should write a story, like a funny story about all of our dates. And I said, well, no, I'm a thriller writer. So I'd rather write a book about a woman who goes out and tries to get revenge on these people on the app. And so that's kind of how the idea started. And then I had the idea that a reporter or a detective or somebody would kind of start to suspect it and go undercover and try to catch her. And that's kind of what the book is about. And that's when I approached R.G. Belsky, who, we kind of knew each other from International Thriller Writers, and we'd read a couple of each other's books. And I asked him if he wanted to write the male protagonist journalist, because he was a journalist for many, many years. And I figured he would be able to do a great job with it. And he did. So that's kind of how it started.
Well, yeah, my recollection of some of that is a little bit different than Bonnie's, in that my first reaction to when she said, do you want to write this, was, are you nuts? What are you crazy? I mean, this is one of the issues being that Bonnie is, because of her friends and also because of the other stuff she knows, is very knowledgeable about dating apps, familiar with it all. When you read the book, you realize that my character, Jake Parker, is not only is he not knowledgeable about it, but he's very skeptical of it and doesn't think much of it when he first gets the assignment to look into the dating apps. And a lot of that's coming from me because, I knew nothing about this. As Bonnie was somewhat surprised at some point, saying, well, come on, Jake would know that. I was like, no, I don't know that. But I just wanted to add, when Bonnie talked about we had known each other for ITW, the real story here, and this is really interesting on her other books too, is I had been reviewing a bunch of books for a website called Book Trib, and some of them weren't too good. Some of them were okay. And I read one of Bonnie's books, and I was kind of blown away. And I was like, wow, this woman's really good. And I reached out to her, and I told her. So we started corresponding. And then, because I liked her books and she liked my books, we decided, okay, we could work together. And that's what we did.
Yeah, I love that. I was wondering what kind of connection you had to just reach out and say, hey, you want to write this book with me?
Well, except for the fact that during the cold weather months in New York when we were doing it, Bonnie kept telling me how beautiful the weather was in Hawaii, which got me very annoyed at her. But other than that, we worked pretty well together. So everybody knows, I live in New York City. She lives in Hawaii. They're both wonderful places to live, but very different.
Very different. Yeah. And I'm a bit envious of you both. I'm in Austin, Texas. So I'm right in the middle.
It's a nice
uh,
town. I've been there. It's a nice town.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the story. So Sonya's journey, Bonnie, starts off feeling almost justified, but spins wildly out of control. How did you approach building sympathy for a character who crosses some dangerous lines?
It was tricky. And actually, that's where I'll say one thing, that having a co author helps because, on the early chapters, Dick was like, why is she doing this, Bonnie? Like, she's like, you got to kind of put some more backstory in. So it really helped to have that feedback. So as I went, I started to drip in. I don't like to dump a lot of backstory in the beginning because I think it slows the book down, and readers
Mm.
really, especially of our genre, want a lot of action. So I kind of like dripped in the backstory and the reasons why, she was like that, and needed to have her character arc toward the end, which I think kind of works, but I can't really give that away. You'd be a better judge of that than me.
Yeah.
About that, one interesting thing was the first chapter of the book, and I'm not, there's no spoilers here because I think the first sentence of the book is basically, we have somebody dying in the first sentence of the first page of the book. And Sonya is involved in this. I mean, she's there when it happens. There's all sorts of guilt and what she did and what she didn't do. And that's something we really played around with a bit, wasn't it, Bonnie? I mean, Bonnie had written it one way originally, then we sort of altered it and changed it. And it was all about trying to find that balance where you wanted to have Sonya with all these flaws. You wanted to have Sonya with a lot of issues, a lot of guilt and stuff. But you wanted to be rooting for her. And I think if you just even read the first chapter of Swipe, hopefully that captures all those elements of Sonya. But that didn't come easy. And we went back and forth on that until we actually thought we got that first chapter right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
I love that you have kind of your own mini writing circle, to bounce ideas off each other.
the tagline is Sonya's fed up with bad internet dates, but she never meant to kill anyone, right? So that kind of encapsulates I wrote that after though, but that's sort of where we end up.
And you don't know exactly what happened in the first chapter until later. And even Sonya, there are things that occur and she finds out there are events that occur as to what happened that led up to this. And I think that makes it very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. What about Jake's perspective? He kind of adds an entirely different emotional texture to the story. How would you describe what Jake is searching for?
He's what I was for many years. He's a newspaper guy, a journalist, and what you're searching for is a big story and all the adrenaline of doing this. I should point out, I've now done, I've been doing it for a long time. I've published 24 books, and I think most of them, the vast majority of them feature a reporter like Jake Parker. So it's something I've written about. It was one of the reasons Bonnie, I think, approached me because she had read a couple of my reporter books. I try and capture in Jake a lot of the elements of the people I worked with in New York City media and also in myself, which is, in this case, Jake, much like much of the newspaper world, is out of a job because he had been a big star reporter and the paper is gone and out of business and all papers are going. And he's at this crappy website doing soft feature stories. And while he's doing a soft feature story about dating apps, which he does not want to do, he suddenly stumbles across what he thinks could be a murder or more than one murder. And it becomes a big, big story. And that's what he lives for. And I try to capture that in his character.
I'm going to add something because Dick and I just did a little promo video and he mentioned something in it that I thought was quite an astute observation. He talked about how a lot of people think, there's a big story and the media goes and covers it. But he gave the example of Watergate where it didn't start out as this big story about the president. It was just a little break-in story. And sometimes reporters, have to really find the story. I mean, there's a story there, but a reporter who's super determined, can go and find a story. And I thought that was a really interesting, just observation from somebody who was a star reporter himself.
Yeah, what I had said was a lot of people just think, oh, it's a big story. And I mean, there can be stories like that. But what I think is great, and especially in terms of fiction, is when a reporter finds some little element of thread and it keeps pulling at it, and it gets bigger and bigger, and then it turns into a big story. And it is, Watergate was a long time ago, it was 50 years ago, 60, more than 50 years ago. But,
Wow.
It is considered the thing people always talk about the height of journalism, investigative journalism. And, it's just what Bonnie said, which was, It wasn't in the beginning. It was a robbery. It was a robbery at a political headquarters. And that's why Woodward and Bernstein were covering it and not top people, because they were kids. They didn't have a big beat or anything. And that's a little bit what I tried to capture with Jake here, that he's doing basically a dopey story in his mind, and yet he stumbles onto something and he doesn't let go.
Yeah, he's determined. Describes him to a T, I think. And I love how he just kept digging for that bigger story. No, there's something here. There's something here, and I'm going to find it. I love that.
And I think in different ways than Sonya, I try to make him flawed too, because like nobody likes people who are perfect or good or anything. And Jake makes some bad decisions along the way in his life and his career and in the book too. And that's like with Sonya, it was important to present him in that way. You know, he's not perfect, but you kind of hopefully you like him and you respect him.
Yeah, absolutely. So Swipe explores deception, betrayal, and almost a desperate search for connection, which I feel like we're going through in the world today. Was there a particular theme about modern relationships you hoped readers would kind of sit with after finishing the book?
I guess I just wanted to tell a fun story initially. I didn't really set out to say, oh, I'm going to like have this moralizing story about dating apps. And just so, the dating app companies don't come after me, like I met my second and current husband on, I guess it wasn't a dating app, it was dating websites. They didn't really have the apps back then. My daughter met her husband on a dating app. I mean, a lot of people are meeting that way, but
Yeah.
there's also a lot of deception going on. In fact, the other day, a friend of mine called and told me she was out to dinner with a guy. And halfway through dinner, she met in an app, and he told her he was married. And I texted Dick. I said, "You're not going to believe this." It's like, I mean, it really happens. And it, you have that, with the dating app that was for cheaters. You remember that? I mean, I watched that Netflix documentary, and I was just thinking about, the whole reason why people do this, and also like the psychology of kind of being a catfisher. Like if you are on there and you just want to talk to other people. Everybody creates kind of a facade on social media, even if you're not directly doing it. I mean, we have the FOMO and these curated bits of people.
Yeah.
So I think that the dating app is just an extreme example of, what's going on. I mean, you look at people's Facebook pages and you think, gosh, they're never having a bad day. Like, look at these people. But it's really not like that. And I guess, you just kind of have to be, cautious, guardedly optimistic, not paranoid is kind of where I was trying to land.
Okay.
And I've said this in a couple of interviews. People say to me, what was your favorite part of writing this book? And for me, it was finding out all this stuff about the dating apps, which I didn't know, and making up stuff. So as part of the, assuming most people listening may not have read the book yet, a great part of what Jake does in the beginning is he goes on a lot of dates, because the whole idea is he's supposed to be, doing a firsthand account of what it's like on the dating apps.
Right.
And so I got to write many of my early chapters were Jake. I mean, not really about murders or anything. They're about Jake just like meeting people on dating apps and these horrible experiences. And that was fun. I give this, you can read this through the book, but, like at one point there's a very strange threesome offered to him. He's got women bringing their children and wanting them to be their father on their first date, just crazy. And the weirdest thing was, no matter how imaginative I was and how out there I thought of something, I would then either ask Bonnie or Google it and find out like, oh yeah, no, that actually happened. And there's a couple stories in here from Bonnie, like again, and she points out is like, no, a friend of mine, this just happened. And so I think there's kind of like two elements, which is there's the murder and the murders and what's going on and the mystery and the thriller part. But a lot of it is just the life on the dating apps and all the experiences. She had to write it mostly from Sonya's point of view. I got to write it from Jake's point of view, who just met a lot of crazy people and one or two good ones along the way too.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, what do they say? Truth is stranger than fiction, right?
That is true sometimes, as a journalist I've found over the years, and this is a little off topic, but so I was involved in covering the O.J. Simpson case for 2 years. And I always used to say to people, you could not make up a more amazing murder case than O.J. Simpson. I mean, no fiction author could do it. It's true. Sometimes what actually goes on out there is more than you could even imagine.
Yeah. I guess I want to hear from both of you on this one because it involves both of your characters. Both Sonya and Jake deal with disillusionment, Sonya with dating, Jake with journalism. Do you see the parallels in their struggles for authenticity?
It's funny. I really didn't see the parallel until you mentioned it, but it is true. They both are disillusioned. And I think maybe that's why they gravitate to one another, but they're also skeptical of one another because they have this kind of like jaded disillusionment. But I think
Yeah.
both of them, and Dick can, speak more about Jake, but reading his part as a reader, they both have this like spark of hope. Like they're not giving up and they push forward through the skepticism. So I think, yes, there's disillusionment, but there's also this kind of spunk underneath it that makes you hopefully want to root for both of them to kind of move past it. What do you
Yeah.
think, Dick?
I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. Like Bonnie said, I didn't really think about that or a comparison between the two, but yeah, there is. I guess they're kind of kindred souls in some ways, just for different reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I love there's kind of like a simmering question. I mean, for me, it's like how far is too far when it comes to teaching someone a lesson? And did you ever find yourselves disagreeing on just like how dark the story should get?
So
I don't think so.
I don't think it's a particularly dark book. I think in some ways it's funny and an easy reading. And yes, there's certainly dark elements to it, but I've read some really dark books, and I don't think that's what you're getting.
I think it, yeah, and in places, I feel like it has a little bit of a dark comedy vibe, even like with the
Right.
dates and the stuff that's going on. At least that's kind of what I was aiming
Yeah.
for. Not something that was super dark, but it's definitely dealing with difficult themes. But also, just some of it's so damn funny. Like the dates are so, I mean, they're so bizarre that they're funny. And I wanted readers to kind of enjoy it. But yeah, the going too far thing, I think that was also like reflected in what we talked about in the beginning of the interview with like where Sonya's head is at. Something happens in the beginning and she's not even sure how complicit she is, but she knows that this is bad. Like it's one thing to, get a guy, a DUI ticket. It's another thing to like push him off a cliff or maybe have him do something that causes him to fall off a cliff. But
Mhm.
then, of course, there's other things going on in the app that neither of them know. That adds the whole other dimension, but we can't really tell you too much about that because you're going to have to read it to find out.
And I think the co-author thing, and I've never co-authored a book with anybody in my life before, but I think the co-author thing helped in terms of, like when you said, did we have disagreements on how dark it should be? Because we were able to bounce it off. Like if you're writing a book on your own, you're like, oh, is this too dark? Is it too, am I being too light or whatever? And I know in my case, whenever Bonnie said something to me about my character, then I really listened. And the same with her, because we could judge each other's characters probably better than we could judge our own characters. And, it's not an experience an author normally has. So I think that really helped. And I think in almost all the cases where there were questions about the character, we listened to each other and we came up with, what we thought was the best balance.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Yes, it was a project, so obviously there was a lot of work involved, but also just that opportunity to get to know each other and each other's writing styles and find out that you clicked and you put out this amazing novel. And I love that.
And one other element of that, which helped because there were two of us, I guess, and this is the way I always write books, is this wasn't some well thought out plan, And this might be one of your questions, like, did you know where the book was going and all that? I sure didn't. And we would surprise ourselves sometimes. There were a couple of chapters. I remember one or two with Bonnie where, somebody would suddenly die or something. And I'd go, whoa, where did that come from? And then there was one chapter I wrote involving Sonya, and this involved her character. I'm not going to say what it is, but it involved her character. And it's a revelation that I gave her that she hadn't thought of. And she was like, oh my God, when I saw that. So we just went through the book like that. We didn't have the ending completely in hand. I think that hopefully makes it a better read.
Yeah, one thing I thought was really fun is we had like the beginning, and the reason I wanted, RG to do this and not me is because he would have a better idea of like how a reporter might stumble onto this. So I just wrote the first couple chapters and I left it up to him to figure out how he was going to stumble onto it. And when I read it, I was like, oh, damn, that's a good idea. Like I got to read it as a reader too. So it was really interesting because I'm writing a book, but I'm also like a reader, a frontline reader, and it's my own book. And, the other thing was we agreed when we started out that, we would just do this as like a writing exercise and see where it went. Like we weren't like we have to make this a book. We were both very flexible. And then when we just kind of got on the flow, we're like, well, I think we got a book here. Let's finish it. And so
didn't you didn't you originally see it as a short story? I think at one point.
yeah, I think we said, maybe short story or like whatever. But I think the point being like, if anyone is thinking about co-authoring, is just like being really flexible, not having like fixed expectations, because it could get really dicey, but it didn't. Like we got along pretty well. And, it was a lot of fun. So,
Yeah.
And also, Bonnie and I have, in some ways, if you read our individual books, which I'm sure you will, sure you'll go out and buy all of them. In some ways, we are different. I'm much more like a kind of hard-boiled police procedural reporter, FBI cop kind of books. And Bonnie's really much more domestic thrillers. And so that we were in different worlds to some degree. But our writing, I think, is very similar in that we're not heavy-duty writers. We don't spend a lot of time with like details like you'll read in a thing. I mean, we move quick. There's a lot of dialogue. So that, I just think that all sort of played into it. And the other thing that, this isn't necessarily always a good thing, but I write very fast. And what I discovered was Bonnie writes even faster than I write. And we literally would, well, I want to say inspire us, but also challenge each other, I think. And we wrote this book in it was weeks, right? It wasn't that long. I know we only read half a book each, but it just, at one point, Bonnie was like, we have 40,000 words. Oh my God, we're getting close to a book. But what would happen would be, I would write, literally every day, I'd write like a chapter and I'd send it to her. And she'd like, oh, this is great. Here's 2 more chapters. And I go, oh my God, she's written 2 chapters. And I got and it was cool. It was great. It was fun. And I think that the trickiest part I remember of it was when the 2 characters come together, because, obviously at some point Sonya and Jake have to merge because that's, so we're writing individual chapters. I'm writing Jake, she's writing Sonya, and that's easy. And then when they meet, we had to sort of figure out who wrote what chapter and do we do duplicate chapters on each. And that was a little tricky.
Yeah, because then all of a sudden I'm writing a character that Dick created instead of just my own characters. And I'm putting in the dialogue, not just of Jake, but there's characters that he created in his part and characters that I created in mine. And then if any of those people meet, you have to kind of stay true to the character. So we were, again, pretty willing to listen to each other. Like, oh, I don't think Sonya would say that, or I don't think Jake would say that, or yeah, that sounds good. And there wasn't a lot of it, but we were able to like check each other and make sure it sounded like, hopefully, you're the reader. Hopefully it sounded consistent like when Jake was in Sonya's point of view and vice versa, that they still sounded like them.
Yeah.
I also point out though that, and I don't remember exactly the whole background, but the name Jake Parker actually came not from me, but from Bonnie. I had another name for the reporter, and Bonnie was like, oh, I don't think that's like a great name or whatever. And,
I didn't think he sounded like a millennial. I thought he sounded too old.
And so I couldn't, I've got a lot of names for a lot of characters, but I was like, oh, I'm struggling. And then we sort of did Jake Parker as kind of a holding name. It was kind of like, we'll call him Jake Parker for now until we decide. And then at some point I just decided, no, I like Jake Parker. We'll go with that.
Yeah, he became Jake. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And to comment on your comment, Bonnie, about could I tell as a reader? No, I couldn't tell. And actually, I didn't know going in who wrote which character. I kind of assumed, which was wrong of me to assume things. I just assumed since you were the female, you wrote the female character, but I didn't know for a fact. To me, it flowed really smoothly.
Great.
And just to comment on your comment earlier about reading books, I've read a couple of Bonnie's books. I haven't dug into any of yours yet, but I do love hard-boiled detectives, so I'm going to check out a couple audiobooks for sure. So
yeah, most of my books are set in the media, but I read some books under the name of Dana Perry, and those are more like law enforcement, but I read a lot of women, which is, that most of my characters are not Jake Parker, but they're women. I've always found writing female characters to some degree is just more interesting because it gives you more opportunity to do stuff and have them overcome stuff. So yeah.
Now you talked a little bit about Bonnie. You talked a little bit about the other characters, and I loved your supporting cast as well. My favorites were Jake's awful dates. Those were amazing. They added so much flavor. I felt like. Were there any side characters that you had an especially good time creating?
I liked Olivia Furman, like Matt's wife. I thought she was kind of an interesting character. And I guess we both sort of worked on her, didn't we? I mean, Jake goes to see
Well,
Olivia.
there's questions about what she did or didn't do. She's part of the investigation as well as the thing. So, no, she's a fascinating character, and I think the two people I liked in Jake's world were because they kind of fit what I wanted. One was the police officer, so he worked very closely with a police officer, a detective, who, on the one hand, is very skeptical. It's kind of like, oh, you're the hotshot reporter. There's nothing going on here, but Jake wins him over, and this guy basically sort of comes onto his side and starts to respect him. And that relationship is always fun. And of course, I always love to do the boss who gets annoyed at the reporter. And so I have Jake having a boss in this who doesn't understand why he just doesn't want to write a damn feature about dating apps and why he's going on about murders and all this stuff. And eventually, of course, he comes around too and realizes that, oh my God, Jake's onto something. So, those two relationships with Jake, I thought were, from my point of view, were interesting to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably the most important relationship for Sonya is with her sister Bella, because her sister is, she's her older sister. They kept some things from Sonya about how their mom died, which, created some of Sonya's like resentment and skepticism about people. And then I can't really tell you how she gets connected to the whole overall plot, but she does. And so she's another like morally gray area person, like almost all my characters. So Bella and her relationship with Sonya is important to the story and plot and the character development of Sonya.
Yeah. I love how the two of them are very, I found it entertaining, but from my perspective, they were both pretty manipulative and maybe not in a bad way. They just knew how to get people to do what they wanted to do. Like Jake with the police lieutenant, he knew how to work that guy to kind of get what he wanted. And then I felt like Sonya did the same thing with her relationships. It's like they both know how to work a room is what I was trying to get at, I guess.
I think with Jake, that's a great deal of being a reporter. It's what you tend to do. You tend to have to manipulate people and to get what you want. And sometimes you have to do some things that aren't necessarily above board to get the story that you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess looking back now, Bonnie, maybe you can start. Was there a chapter that you were most proud of because it kind of captured exactly what you wanted the readers to feel?
I really like the epilogue.
The epilogue is fun. Right?
So make sure, read to the end. I like the first scene because I think that sets it off. And then a difficult scene to write that I ended up liking, but I had to work on it a lot, was, the showdown, the climax with the antagonist, which I can't say who it is. It was a tough scene, but I eventually got through it. What about for you, RG? Anyone you?
I think the beginning chapters were the most fun, maybe because I didn't know what we were doing, but the setup of him discovering the dating apps and all his sort of curiosity and stuff, those were fun. But no, I don't know that there's anything specific. The other thing with Jake, we actually had a lot more about this in the original version, and for a lot of reasons we took it out. But, his personal life himself is kind of screwed up. He has been, I think I have him engaged twice to the same woman, and he's still trying to win her over. So he's got his own issues, and some of that was interesting to write about too.
Okay. But you've had a lot of feedback, early feedback. Is there anything that stands out to you the most so far?
I feel like the universal feedback that we've gotten from everybody was that it's a page turner. They couldn't put it down. Even our threes are saying that, I couldn't put it down, blah, blah, blah. So we've got a lot, and we got a lot of traction on NetGalley. We were number 1 mystery and thriller on the UK, number 5 in the US for a couple of weeks. So we got over 1,000 downloads. We've got over 150, or 40 something reviews, and we're having a little glitch with Amazon getting them on there, but hopefully when the ebook comes out, it'll go a little more smoothly. But I will also mention that this is the first time I've had my ebook, what we call wide, where it's going to be everywhere. So it's going to be everywhere from Amazon to Barnes & Noble to Kobo, Smashwords, in the library sites, libraries can download them. So it'll be everywhere. And then the print book will be on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Okay,
and actually,
nice.
I think it's on IndieBound now, too.
And Bonnie, when Bonnie reached out to me a few weeks ago when it went on NetGalley, I think we were number 11 on NetGalley in America. We were number 1 at one point in NetGalley in the UK. And I don't mean
Nice.
number one thriller. Like we were above Michael Connelly, and I was
Yeah.
like, this is amazing. And clearly this isn't because nobody's read the book at this point. It was the amount of people who downloaded it. And I think it just goes to the topic, the idea of dating apps and murder and revenge by a woman and all that kind of stuff. So many people, when I've told them the line, what it's about, have been, oh, wow, that's a great idea. And sadly, although I'd like to claim credit for it, the idea is Bonnie. She couldn't have done the book without me, but actually she could have. And, for me, one other thing is that, again, this is the area that Bonnie writes books in. I had somebody in the publishing business said to me, oh, this is really good for you because there's going to be a whole audience of people that don't know you. They're going to get to know you from this book. And then, hopefully, much like you, Sherry, they're going to go back and read all 24 of my other books.
That's right. That's right. And that works both ways. So you've already adopted each other's audiences, and I love that. And it's a great topic. I don't know if everybody has been on a dating app, but everybody has wondered what they're like. It's a fascinating topic, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So you're busy now with Swipe, and do you have individual projects going on as well that you can talk about, Bonnie?
Okay, so I have a manuscript out for submission, another domestic thriller. It's set in New York City in the Hamptons, where I kind of like my old stomping grounds. And I'll have more info on that on my website in the months to come about a release date or whatever. I think I told you that Podium Entertainment acquired the audiobook rights to The Unforgetting, my last release that you also read. So that should be coming out around sort of end of the summer. Helen Laser, who did The Wedding People, is going to be narrating it. So I'm super excited about that because she is just so fantastic. And then I'm working on another like very weird manuscript that's a little bit different for me. And we'll see how that goes. I think I've got, 35,000 words.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. How about you, RG?
No, I'm doing nothing. No, I recently just signed a contract with publisher Level Best Books to do a book called The Mogul. It'll be out in 2026. This is a lot different book than anything I've ever done. It's a kind of a sprawling book that takes place over a couple of decades, set in the New York City media world. And a lot of it is kind of inspired by my own career in the New York City media world. And it's about I call it like a Citizen Kane story about a powerful newspaper executive publisher who starts off like as a good guy trying to do a thing and falls more and more into corruption. And the story is narrated by this guy who works for him and begins to feel guilty about a lot of the stuff he did. So it's a completely different kind of book. It's very funny. Quick aside, at one point, Bonnie said to me, you should write a book, sort of inspired by all the people you worked with or whatever in the thing. And I said, as a matter of fact, I have that book. And this is it. So it got sold. I have another book that I just did, which I think is a great hook too, like the dating app thing, which is about a disgraced child star who was involved in a TV show that ended in a tragic murder by a stalker. By her co-star was killed when she was 13 years old. And now she's 15 years later and her life's a mess. Her career was ruined. And she goes back to attempt to find out what really happened that day. And it's called Primetime Crime. And finally, I've done, my ongoing series. I've done 6 books now on a character called Claire Carlson, who's a TV newswoman in New York. And she's a lot of fun to write. She's feisty and she solves murders and all that. And I'm hoping to be able to, do some more of those too.
Busy. Lots of good things to come. I love it. Do you think you might ever do another collaboration?
Never, ever. Not in a million years. No, we actually, it's funny because we never really talked about that. We want Swipe to come out and then we'll see. It was an interesting experience. But it requires the right kind of project. This was, I think, a perfect situation for us to put our talents together.
Yeah, we did have a lot of people, not a lot, but a number of people say, oh, is there going to be a sequel? And then a number of people say it should be a movie. So if there's any filmmakers out there that want to bring it to the screen, RG and I are welcome to talk. Right?
Yeah, we're not going to turn down any script offers, screenplay of any kind. So
right.
That's right. Okay. Well, did either one of you have anything you wanted to add today?
If you're interested, give it a try. It's a fun, fast read for everybody. So that's the consensus on it. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah. It sounds like you had a lot of fun creating it. RG, Bonnie, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing a little bit about you and your work. I really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit behind the scenes. So thank you.
Thank you for having us, Sherry.
Thank
Aloha.
you, Sherry.
Thank you so much for joining me today for my interview with R.G. Belsky and Bonnie Traymore. Learn more about the authors at rgbelsky.com and bonnietraymore.com. And be sure to check out our other interviews at InsideScoopLive.com.